Hello again. Let's continue with our discussion about the legacy of FW de Klerk. He was the last president of apartheid South Africa before democracy dawned on the country in 1994. He died at the age of 85 yesterday following a battle with asbestos cancer. I'm being joined by the executive director of the FW de Klerk Foundation, Dave Steward, PAC President Mzwanele Nyhontso, and activist Father Michael Lapsley, who got a letter bomb in April 1990 while he was in Zimbabwe, sent to him by the apartheid death squads while de Klerk was still president. And he told the TRC that he holds de Klerk politically and morally responsible. After all, he was the head of state. Now, Mzwanele Nyhontso, the PAC president as well. Mr. Nyhontso, you heard just before the break the response by Dave Steward, basically saying it's not true that a man who was freeing political prisoners, a man who was unbanning political organizations like the PAC, for example, would then go to be in bed with the warmongers of the time. In fact, he had told them that the time for war was over. How do you respond to that?
Now Dave is a racist. He's here to defend apartheid. You see, Dan, firstly, the PAC was not supposed to be banned. Why were we banned? For fighting for our own country, a country that was given to us by God. This is the God-given gift, the land. Why were we banned in the first place by white people? Remember, Dave, we were not fighting for the democracy. Democracy is not what we were fighting for. And our own oppressors would not tell us that the war was over. We were fighting for the land. The item of conflict is the land. Our leaders were hanged. Our leaders were jailed. Our leaders went to exile because they were fighting for the land, not for the democracy. And where is the land today? Still in the hands of white people. Where is the land today where the lives of our people have not been changed? After 27 years of the so-called democracy, our people have been betrayed. They still live in squalor. They still live in the situation they were. In fact, they are far worse, and then we are told that there is democracy. It is not about that. Those ones who are calling de Klerk a man of integrity are the ones who are co-opted to the system, and they live well, they dine with white people, they marry white ladies, they go in with same swimming pools. That's not what we're fighting for. We're fighting for the land, and the oppressors could not tell us and tend to be our liberators. Now that's not true. Dave is a racist, and let me tell you, Dan. De Klerk said after the death of children in Umtata, I sanctioned the operation. George Meyreng, the former chief of SADF, claimed the operation. 2-3 years ago, de Klerk interviewed by Al Jazeera. He said, I killed those children in Umtata on the information of intelligence. He accepted to that. We wanted him to take responsibility. Why didn't he go to TRC and get interrogated? The family must find closure. We want to know who pulled the trigger. We wanted to know who was in Umtata. Why did they go there? Who were they? We want the names. That's what other parties were doing.
Mr. Nyhontso, yes, I'm sorry, I'm chipping in here because of time. I want everybody to speak. You've just accused Dave Steward of being a racist. Are you racist, Dave?
Yes.
No, not at all. And I can understand why our friend is not keen on democracy, because the PAC does so very badly at it. And the whole question of land is something that we South Africans must resolve. But I reject very strongly his racist comment that white people don't belong in South Africa. I ask him to look at the Constitution, which says that South Africa belongs to all of its people who live here. And what de Klerk was trying to do was to help create a basis with other leaders for a manner in which we could all live together and prosper together. And that is the essence of our Constitution.
But why is it that even at his death, I mean, it's not the first time. Even last year when he made that controversial remark that apartheid he doesn't think was a crime against humanity, as an example, which is still sticking no matter what has happened since, to be fair to all of us. When we think about FW de Klerk, even yesterday, that's one of the first things I remembered. This is a leader who said apartheid was not a crime.
You don't remember that he withdrew that statement. He withdrew that statement.
My point, yeah, Mr. Mr. Steward, hold on. My point is, why do you think that he's become such a divisive figure, although you say he sought out at the beginning to leave the war behind and transition into a different future? Why is that we get stuck on that part of the legacy?
Because anybody, I think, who really changes society, anybody who has a real impact on the real world, is going to make enemies. And let me tell you that he is attacked and vilified much more from the right wing than from the left wing, even our friends from the PAC. He is regarded as a traitor and sellout by right-wing white South Africans. And by extremists like the PAC, EFNF, and so forth. They also don't like him. It's also a way of stirring up support for themselves. But the great majority of South Africans in the center, I think, have appreciation for what FW de Klerk did to dramatically change South Africa. And
okay.
those are the people that we would like to listen to.
Let me bring in Father Lapsley. Father Lapsley, you've been listening here to both gentlemen. I've let you for some time. I mean, you were a victim, among many others, of the death squads, and you survived, but you lost both your hands in that explosion in Zimbabwe in April 1990. I mean, how do you feel when you hear that there was a recorded apology that has now been released right at the end there? And why is it that de Klerk's legacy still remains a controversial one?
Well, I think there are many reasons. You see, I am among those who say he should be credited for having responded. I don't think it was about conscience, which he claims. It was about responding to the overwhelming pressure of the people of South Africa and the peoples of the world that brought him to the negotiating table. But I think it's to do with the violence and the mayhem and the torture that continued. I'm sure Dave Steward is conversant with the doctrine of deniability. And the apartheid regime was a master of that, where the political masters could say, we know nothing about that. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, where the operatives were given free rein, which of course is part of the point that someone like Eugene de Klerk made. But I think actually, Dan, this is a time for those of us who are white to actually introspect, and for us, particularly as white people, to say apartheid was a crime against humanity. It's true that he withdrew because of the scale of uproar around the country. The fact that he said it shows that he believed it. But we have to, in a way, face white privilege. We have to face that still in our economy, a disproportionate amount of it is in white hands. And there will not be peace in this country while we are the most unequal society on earth. So the death of de Klerk is an opportunity for us to say, yes, he went so far. He was incapable of helping the white community face its complicity with evil for whatever reason. But we have to pick that up and we have to deal with that if we are going to. And we have to find the ways of redress, of working for transformative justice if our grandchildren are going to live in peace and not be at war with each other. We have to deal with our guilt and shame about what we were party to.
Mr. Nyhontso, is that possible, what Father Lapsley is suggesting?
No, what is possible is there will only be justice in this country when the land is given to its owners, the Africans. Remember, Dan, these ones, they are busy saying that majority of South Africans are happy. That's not true. Majority of South Africans are suffering, and the land is still in the hands of white people. And remember, the white people themselves in this country have been calling themselves Europeans and calling us non-Europeans. And the problem started when we said this country belongs to all who live in it. It doesn't. It belongs to Africans. And anyone who is here in Africa must pay his loyalty and allegiance to Africa, irrespective of color or creed. But the moment they call themselves Europeans, they call themselves Europeans. They called us non-Europeans in Africa. They call themselves settlers, 1820 settlers. When we say they are settlers, they are saying we are racist. They call themselves all these names. Dave, the item of conflict is the land. You've just said it, Father. South Africa has just overtaken Brazil as the most unequal society country in the world. And who is suffering? Africans and blacks in particular. Now, people have just been killed in Phoenix, in KZN. The racists like Dave and Stan Hazen call those Indians heroes, because so many, more than 300 black people were killed, because the blood, the death of a black man does not have value in this country. Don't you think families of Boy Patong victims, they need closure from de Klerk? Don't you need the families of all the cadres who were killed, including those who were hanged, including the families of Craddock 4? 2 weeks ago, I was in Umtata talking to the father, Tata Sqibompendulo, whose children were killed by de Klerk at night when they were sleeping in cold blood. And he was saying, I need closure. What happened? Who came here and killed my kids? And then we cannot just say there is peace. We want justice. Justice, not peace. And justice will come only when these people come and confess to their sins. So many families don't have closure. Where are the judges who send our people to the gallows? Where are they? They are enjoying retirement somewhere in the suburbs of Johannesburg, in the farms. They're owning farms. Where are the generals, those Mayrangs and others who killed our people, who instructed the death of our people? 5 people were killed in 1985 in Crusher's Neck, a woman, Boniswa Ngugana, and others, Rex Mkete and so on, killed by South African police. Those families need closure, but these guys have the audacity to say de Klerk did something. No, he killed us. He will never get condolence from the PAC. Our hearts and our prayers are with his victims, and we insist that his remains should be taken away from Africa, maybe in Holland. That's where they belong.
Very, very, very strong words there. But Father Lapsley was suggesting that maybe we should find a way of going forward. And as you can hear, Father Lapsley, from Mr. Nyhontso, there's a lot of stuff. And you yourself referred, for example, to the killing of those young people in Umtata not so long ago. Dave, when you hear this as a foundation that carries the name of FW de Klerk, how do you think it will be possible going forward so that we build a future that will be different from what de Klerk represented and what the majority of South Africans today are feeling? Because there's a lot of mixed reaction, and people, as you said yourself when we started the discussion, we are divided on FW de Klerk's legacy. But how do we use this and learn from this and try and chart a different way forward? Any thoughts from the foundation's perspective? Because this is, I would say, this is feedback that maybe you require at this time.
Well, what I'm saying is that we have expressed here views of the extreme from one side of the extremist part of South Africa. There are extremists on the other side. The great majority of South Africans, I think, want to live together, grow the country together. They want to make the vision and the Constitution a reality. I think that's what we should learn from this. I think that the legacy, not only of FW de Klerk, but of all of the people who were responsible for negotiating our 1993 and 1996 constitutions, is the possibility of building a just non-racial state. And you may have heard me, my friend from the PAC, a non-racial state. So that, I think, is where we must gather. We people in the center, I think the overwhelming majority of South Africans must work together to make the vision in our Constitution a reality. We're not going to get anywhere by shouting at one another and by saying that these people don't belong in South Africa and those people must go and these people are evil and these people are good. We've got to gather around the center, and that is represented by the values in our Constitution. So that, I think, is the message. And I hope that will be the legacy of FW de Klerk.
Father Lapsley, we are heading towards the end of our discussion now. You're just for this part, we will of course be carrying on. But Well, when you hear Dave Stewart's response about that the vast majority of us in South Africa in the centre, we can work together, and you made a very interesting suggestion earlier about white South Africans have to accept and acknowledge that apartheid was a crime against humanity, and that the majority of the people in the country who are Africans have suffered, and that we need to change. How do you think we can move forward, Father Lapsley?
Well, you know, just a second further on de Klerk, when he withdrew his comment after a huge outcry, when he said apartheid is not a crime against humanity, and then he withdrew it. But if he was serious about that, we would have seen the apology being transformed into compassion and commitment to those who were the worst victims of apartheid. We never saw an outreaching of compassion, a willingness to come forward for the credit for. I think it's time for a conversation, an overdue conversation, about how wealth is not shared in South Africa. Its majority is in white hands, but there's also a black elite, particularly a politically corrupt elite. So we have to have very urgent conversations about that, and we have to find ways, those of us who have privilege, to acknowledge the privilege and accept that moving towards a just society must cost us in our pockets as well. And there can be multitudinous ways that can happen effectively.
Okay, Father Michael Lapsley, thank you for that. I'm discussing the legacy of FW de Klerk here on eNCA this Friday afternoon with Mzwanele Nyhontso, the PAC President, Father Michael Lapsley, activist, anti-apartheid activist, who lost both his arms in a letter bomb in April 1990 that was sent to Zimbabwe by apartheid death squads at the time that FW de Klerk was head of state. And I've also got Dave Steward, who's the head of the FW de Klerk Foundation. We'll continue with our discussion shortly. Stay